is a real privilege to introduce for our speaker today, State Representative Pat Proctor. Let's give him a warm Pachyderm Club welcome.
So thank you, Carl, and thank you for having me here today. So I serve the people of Leavenworth and Fort Leavenworth in the Kansas House. I'm also chair of the Elections Committee and running for Secretary of State. But they told me they'd have me back for that. Today they wanted me to talk to you in my capacity as the chairman of the Kansas Security Committee. We just had our interim hearing in October on Kansas security. Really fascinating. I'm going to take a few minutes today to talk to you about some of the things that we heard during that committee and then answer any questions that you have. So my intersection with Homeland Security late in my career, after I had done kind of my last deployment and was back here stateside, I served at Fort Polk, Louisiana, which is a garden spot if ever there was one. And if you've ever been there, you know what I'm talking about. But one of the missions that they do there is every year they train the Army Brigade that is responsible for consequence management. So, next year we're going to have the World Cup here. God forbid some cataclysmic event should happen, and it requires a national response. There is an Army Brigade. They rotate the responsibility, but there's an Army Brigade whose job is to go to wherever the cataclysmic event has happened and provide all of the support to the civilian agencies like aviation support, trucks, people, whatever's needed to help with the catastrophe. And I had the opportunity to train that brigade at Fort Polk and get pretty neck deep into the whole kind of homeland security component of what the U.S. military does. And so when I was retiring from the Army in 2019, my plan was not to be in politics, but you want to make God laugh, tell him your plan. My plan was to be a professor in a history department because I have a PhD in history from K-State. Wichita State Criminal Justice Department called me and asked me to come talk to them about being in their new Homeland Security program. And I told them I'm not moving to Wichita. No offense, but I love Leavenworth. And they said, no, just come hear us out. And so we kind of made a deal. I'm down here, when I'm not in the legislature, I'm down here a day a week, and I'm actually a tenure track professor in their program there. So, but yeah, so that's how I came to be involved in Homeland Security. And when I became a legislator, and Eric Smith, who had been a legislator for many years, he's a sheriff. He had been the House chair of that joint committee, and when he retired or left politics, they asked me to take over, and so that's how I ended up in charge of this committee. So we do every year we do a 2-day or 3 days of hearings, and we always try to go someplace different than the Capitol. Go out where security is actually happening, where these folks, professionals, are actually working. And this year, I ran into Tony Mativi. I think he was at I can't remember what he was at. Maybe it was a Pachyderm Club in Topeka. But I asked him if we could have our hearing at the lab, the KBI lab at Washburn, because they've got a really amazing state-of-the-art facility on Washburn University where they do all kinds of forensic science, everything from ballistic, everything you see on CSI. That's what they do. I mean, it's pretty fascinating. So they were gracious enough to allow us to do our meeting there. We spent the whole day doing a tour of that facility. Really amazing capabilities, everything from from ballistics to DNA to all those things they do there. It's pretty fascinating. And then afterwards, we kind of had the formal hearing, and we got to hear from all of the different agencies in Kansas that intersect with Kansas security. And I'll tell you the number one topic, the topic that really is keeping security professionals up at night is China, no doubt. China is what we call in the Army an asymmetric threat. They're not coming at us like other countries come at us, where they just build a giant military and challenge us all over the world. They're coming at us through all these different avenues. And what they're doing is they're exploiting the free market, exploiting the freedom in our country in order to create vulnerabilities. One of the big ones you hear a lot about is foreign land ownership. They try to buy land around critical facilities, of which we have many here in the state: Fort Riley, Fort Leavenworth, McConnell Air Force Base, only being some of the critical areas that we have. And they're definitely doing that. We, not this year, but last year, I got a briefing from an organization called China Tech Threat, and they showed me a map. Up in northwest Kansas, kind of north of Goodland and west of Beloit, China has entered into partnerships with our cities, our municipalities out there, and they're offering them telecommunications equipment at below cost. A company called Huawei, that's a Chinese-owned company. And the concern is that they're putting Trojan horse technologies inside that telecommunications equipment. And the reason it's a concern is because right across the border is where all of our missile silos in the center of the United States is. And the concern is that they've put Trojan horse technologies that can jam the radio transmissions to those silos. So they could turn off our nuclear deterrence with the flick of a switch is the concern. We've done some stuff with that in the House. We passed some legislation to require them to register at least. Some other stuff that we're concerned about is surveillance technology. All the drones that law enforcement use were built in China. And when you download that video, whether it's live streamed or it's downloaded after the fact, the software that comes with that is sending it to China too. And so we outlawed we basically did a sunset for all the Chinese drones. So as law enforcement agencies buy new drones, they have to buy American technology. They can't buy Chinese technology. And you might be asking, well, golly, this is a threat. Why are we tiptoeing around this? Why don't we just ban it? Well, the other problem is foreign adversary lobbying. In our legislature, the same people that are lobbying us on sorghum and corn prices and cattle prices, they're also working for law firms that represent Communist China. And they're not disclosed in any way. If you don't know that law firm has as a client the Chinese Communist Party, then you don't know that you're being lobbied by China. And they come at you like, hey, we're farmers are going to have a really hard time with this, or Smithfield is going to have a really hard time with it. But you're being lobbied by Communist China, and you don't even know it. And so I'm going to be working this year on a bill to require disclosure. There, at the federal level, there's a law called FARA, which is if you're representing a foreign entity, you have to register. I want them to register in Kansas too, so that we know when we're being lobbied by the Chinese. Thank you. Trying to stay on time here. So it is really hard to stand in one place to talk. So another thing that we talked about in the Kansas Security Committee that was really fascinating is drone technology in warfare. I don't know how closely you've been paying attention to the war between Russia and Ukraine, but there is in military parlance, we call it a revolution in military affairs that's occurring. And it's the intersection of AI and drone technology. A few months ago, Ukraine launched a drone attack on a Russian airfield. And with a few drones that cost them $100, $200, they were able to a piece. They were able to wipe out millions and millions and millions of dollars of aircraft, Russian aircraft on an airfield, and the Russians really had no way to respond. And it's scary because so in America we are committed with AI. We are committed to, they call it having a human in the kill chain, which is machines built by Americans are not going to kill people autonomously. We will always have a human who's in the loop making the final decision on whether to fire that lethal shot or not. Our adversaries don't give a crap about that, right? So Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, they don't care about human life the way we do, and so they don't have a human in the kill chain, and that's why you see these videos. If you ever go, I mean, it's horrific. If you go on YouTube, you can see drones chasing a Russian around his tank and hunting him down and blowing him up, or flying inside the tank and blowing him up. And there's no human in that loop. It is totally autonomous. It's just the AI technology that they've embedded in that drone, finding and killing people. And I don't know about you, but that scares the hell out of me. Here in the United States, we are engaged in, and you don't see it on TV, which kind of confounds me, but we're engaged in a moonshot scale program to create anti-drone technologies to protect our critical infrastructure. Because if an adversary wanted to attack us, they wouldn't march armies across our borders, though they sort of did here over the last 4 years. They wouldn't march armies over our borders. They would use these drones to attack our critical infrastructure and paralyze us. And so, interestingly, Kansas is at the epicenter of this investment in technology and development. Salina has for years been kind of the Army's center for UAS, unmanned aerial systems training. And so there've already been a whole bunch of kind of regulatory hurdles jumped through to clear our airspace for autonomous aircraft. And so the Army and the U.S. military, the Department of War, is looking at Kansas as the place where they're going to do this research and develop these systems. So it's really exciting. It's going to be a lot of investment and a lot of jobs for Kansans here in Kansas. And we're going to be on the frontier of some really vital technology to protect our country into the rest of the century. And I will stop and dig down into any of these things if you want to talk about them, but I'm trying to not get in trouble with Carl here. So, all right. So the border was obviously the last time we had a meeting of the Security Committee was the number one topic of conversation, obviously. So we had the opportunity to talk to KBI, talk to the state troopers who are on the front lines of this, because they're the ones that see the consequences of an open border in Texas or in California because it comes into our state. We're the crossroads of the country. You've got I-35 and I-70. They come here to be trafficked all over the country. So what they're telling us is that the border is shut. The border is shut. The illegal immigration has slowed to a trickle, and because they've been able to secure the border, it's enabled them to do a lot of other things nationally that you're seeing on TV, like all the drug interdiction. I saw on TV this morning before I came over here, they seized a ferry in Panama that had something like 14 tons of cocaine on it, which is insane to me. That's a lot of noses. But anyways, they seized that, and they're able to do that. They're able to do the interdiction of those fast boats in the Caribbean because they're not overwhelmed by processing all these illegal immigrants that we're just allowing to walk into the country. But that's the good news. Now there's the bad news. The bad news is that trafficking and smuggling, which is the moving of humans for the purpose of exploiting them, hasn't slowed down. It has plateaued. It was an ever-increasing problem here, but it hasn't stopped. We passed a law a year ago or 2 years ago. Representative Carrie Barth, who's unfortunately now left the legislature, and Rebecca Schmoy from Ottawa were very integral into getting a law passed to make human smuggling a crime, because the problem was there was no state crime against smuggling humans for the purpose of exploiting them. There were trafficking laws, but not smuggling laws. And so if a state trooper stopped a U-Haul and he opened it and it was full of illegal immigrants, all he could do is give them a ticket for not wearing a seatbelt and send them on their way. And so now it's illegal. So now they can actually interdict, and they can take the truck, put the people driving the truck in custody, and help the people that are in the back of the truck back to whatever country they came from, which is awesome, having Tony Mattivi in that job, because we're actually doing that now. We're not just letting them loose in the country. The other problem, which is a huge problem here in Kansas, a huge problem in my district, Leavenworth, is fentanyl. We lose about a dozen young people every year in Leavenworth. That's just in my little town of Leavenworth to fentanyl overdose. And what they told us is that's not stopping. It's not, I thought we closed the border, it would end the problem. It has plateaued. It's no longer an increasing problem, but it has not stopped. And so there's some other way that they're getting this stuff into the country. And so we've still got more work to do. And I can talk more about that if you'd like to. So I mentioned it briefly a second ago. The World Cup is coming to Kansas City here, and several other cities across the country in the next next year. And we had a lot of discussions about that. Had a lot of people come talk to us. There's a couple components to it that are of interest to the Security Committee. First of all, we don't know what countries we're going to have yet, right? So we could have Great Britain and Ireland and and Sweden or something, or we could have Iran, Iraq, North Korea, Russia, and China. We don't know who we're going to get as the teams for our World Cup, and that it's a very different problem, right? If you get Iraq or you get Israel, which is going to be a target, as opposed to some country that's a little less controversial, and so. That's a huge security problem for our local law enforcement, because it's not like the FIFA marches in with the FIFA army and they secure the World Cup. We're responsible for securing the World Cup and all of the sites. And when the teams come, it's not just the teams; it's all the fans come with the teams. So this is a much bigger sport outside the United States, and it's like the national sport in a lot of countries. So if Iran or Saudi Arabia or some country comes here, they're going to bring thousands of fans with them who are going to follow them and are going to descend on wherever in Kansas their base camp is, because most of the teams are not going to be in Kansas City. They're going to be staying at K-State. So there's some other facilities around the state where they're going to be staying to do their practice, and then they'll bus in to the big stadiums like Arrowhead for the actual games. And so we talked about that a lot. We're not going to know until December what teams we got in the first round, and then there's multiple rounds, that you don't know until the games get played what the semifinalists, finalists are going to be. So that's a huge security challenge because they're planning without knowing. Another big security challenge of the World Cup is that we're going to have heads of state here from these countries. And, if it's Great Britain, cool, you've got the British Prime Minister here. But if it's Iran, you've got, the Shah, or not Shah, the Ayatollah here. That's a different problem, right? And so a lot of security concerns. Related to that is money, because the federal government is going to be helping to support with money and resources. We'll be getting Homeland Security folks. We'll be getting U.S. military support, but mostly it's going to be local capabilities from the Kansas Guard and from the local law enforcement agencies with money from the federal government. And so we spent a lot of time on the money. I'm satisfied now. I was a little concerned during the hearing, but I've had a lot of follow-up meetings. We will have legislative oversight on that, because I was afraid that it was just going to be Governor Kelly's piggy bank and she'd use it for personal projects. But we're going to have legislative oversight on that money to make sure that it's going to keeping Kansans safe and not to any governor's pet projects. All right, so the sexiest thing that everybody's probably hoping I'm going to talk about is cybersecurity, because that's a huge vector for threats to the state. So in closed session, we reviewed the results of some audits that the Legislative Post-Audit Division did of our cybersecurity. And I can't go into the specific vulnerabilities that they found, but I'll just tell you that it scared the hell out of me. I don't know if you remember a year or so ago, somebody hacked the judicial system and locked that thing down to the point where they were back to paper and pen to do all of their business in our courts. We are vulnerable to another one of those attacks in our state agencies. And this is the challenge. So our our founders of our state very wisely mirrored the kind of federal model of checks and balances and the diffusion of power and the separation of powers so that no one person could be a tyrant and, kind of dictate everything that happened in the state. That's the good thing. The bad thing is that extends to networks, right? So even more so than in the federal government. The federal government, the entire executive branch, theoretically, works for the president. Well, in the state government, the part of the executive branch works for the governor, part of the executive branch works for the Secretary of State, part of the executive branch works for the Attorney General, the Insurance Commissioner, the State Treasurer. And so they are not subject to demands or orders from the governor. They're subject to the legislature, with the whole state government subject to the legislature, with the courts kind of being our check, but they're not subject to the governor. Well, the governor owns our IT security. The Office of Information Technology Services belongs to the governor, and they run the network. But all these other agencies are on that network, and they don't have to do what they're told. And so you get a very uneven application of the policies that secure our network, which that prevent our private information, our stuff from ending up, on the internet for sale, or us being, blackmailed or anything like that. And so if the agencies that are under the governor, you would think, would be the ones that are the most secure, because the office works for the governor and they work for the governor, and you would think they would just do what they were told. Well, that's not how it's working out. The way it's working out is she's kind of not got her hand on the wheel, and so everybody's doing what they want to do, and they're doing what they feel like doing, and they're doing what's easy. And so we've got some serious problems with some of our agencies, and some of our agencies, I'm like I said, it was in an executive session. I don't want to start rattling off the agencies, but agencies that are touching your personal information and my personal information are at risk. Some of I'm particularly concerned for multiple reasons, not that I'm measuring the drapes, but about the Secretary of State's office, because all our election voter rolls are on their systems, right? And I was very heartened to find out that they're one of the agencies that is taking this seriously and working well with the Office of Information Technology Services. However, so there is all of our voting machines are not on the internet. Okay, that was my law. I passed it my second year in the legislature. Nothing that touches your ballot is on the internet. It's all air gap. Yeah, thank you. Every vote produces a paper ballot, whether you fill in the little circle or you touch the touch screen, and it prints out. There's a paper record of your vote in a human readable form, and you, the voter, have to go stick it in the vote machine because they're not connected by any network. And then there's a little thumb drive and there's a print tape that comes out. So you've got an analog and a digital backup for every count machine, right? However, the voter rolls are connected to the internet. Why are the voter rolls connected to the internet? Well, the voter rolls are connected to the internet. I'm glad you asked that question, because we have 105 counties, and in Kansas, we have a bottom-up election system. So all 105 counties are responsible for maintaining their portion of the voter rolls. The Secretary of State's office cannot add or subtract a single name from our voter rolls. They have to call the clerk and say, hey, and I can talk about this in questions, we found a non-citizen on your voter rolls, take them off the voter rolls. And then the clerk has to do it. So it has to be connected to the internet, because when they make that change, it feeds back up to the Secretary of State's office, which has the giant database. And this database has the worst acronym in the history of acronyms. It's called ELVIS, which stands for Electronic Voting Information System. I don't know where they got the L in there. I guess ELVIS. But that system is very old, and it's at the end of its life cycle. They've actually extended it for a year so that the new Secretary of State, whoever that might be, can decide what the new system is going to look like and what capabilities that system is going to have. Which means that the 2026 election is going to be run the voter rolls are going to be run using that system. And there is a when you go to vote here at the, early at the Sedgwick County office or at your polling place on election day, and you show your ID, I don't know how it is here in Sedgwick County, but I suspect they take your ID and they scan the ID. That when they scan that ID, that poll pad, which is like the digital replacement for the poll book, it says this person voted and it checks you off. And when it checks you off, it goes through the internet so that you can't vote at any other polling place, right? And so it has to be connected to the internet to do that. I'm very concerned about that because that is a backdoor for somebody to monkey with our voter rolls. And so we talked a lot about this. What I'd like to do is explore an intranet rather than an internet, which is what it's on now. It's on the internet. It's encrypted, gajillion bit encryption, whatever, but it's on the internet. And it's never going to be totally secure until it's not connected to the internet. So what I'd like to explore, and we're going to have hearings on it this year, but representatives or elected officials don't like to vote on election laws in election years, so it's very difficult to get things done in the even year. But we're going to have hearings on potentially requiring closed networks for these poll books and see where we can get on that here this session and maybe the following session. But I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions, so I'm going to stop there. Those are the topics that we discussed. But I'd love to answer any questions about this or about elections or anything else you want to talk about.
Well, that's good. It looks like we don't have any questions. No, we have a lot of questions. If you have the intranet, how do the counties know that you've already voted? How does that connect?
Yeah, so within the idea is within the county, there's a network that is not connected to the internet. It's a county network that only the poll books are on. And they would because you can't vote in another county, right? You're only on one voter roll, the voter roll in your county. So the county, all the polling sites would be able to talk to each other. And then at the end of the night, when they take the poll book back, they would have to upload to Elvis or maybe perhaps physically send something to Topeka that says, hey, here's the people who voted. I don't know. Yeah, I think I'm very, very concerned about our voter rolls being connected to the internet that way.
A short one and then a real question. Are the machines that you feed your printed ballots into connected to the internet?
No.
Okay. And Israel is just now starting to roll out their laser defense system, which is going to be good against missiles, aircraft, and drones. As our ally, do you know if Homeland Defense is going to have, and Homeland Security is going to have access to that technology?
So I'm not able to talk about the specifics here in this room, but I will say that we're working with all the other allies that are working on this problem, and we're working on it together. So the stuff that's maybe being fielded in places where the threat is more acute, some of those systems, yes, they're being fielded there, but they're U.S. systems. So.
Thank you. 2 quick questions. How could our security in our United States let a balloon cross the United States? And how could no one take any action to shoot the guy that shot Trump?
Yeah.
Since they knew what was going on.
Yeah. Oh boy, is that all you got? No. Well, there's two components to security. There's having the capability to act, and there's having the will to act. And I think that the Biden administration lacked the will to act. They were, because there wasn't anybody in charge. The autopin was in charge. And so, yeah, day to day, the autopin can sign documents. The autopin can sign pardons. But when you need a critical second-by-second decision out of a commander-in-chief of the U.S. military, we didn't have one for the last 4 years. And so
So we have to have that?
Yeah.
You shot that day?
Yeah, oh yeah, there's absolutely, we had the capability to knock that thing out of the air anywhere along its path. This idea that, well, golly, we didn't want to fall on something important. Well, if it's falling on something important, it's over something important scanning it, you dumb. So sorry, I'm getting fired up. On the assassination, I hate being right, but I was telling people in March that once all the court cases fell through, they were going to take a shot at him and they were going to try to kill him. I mean, and I say that there are elements of the federal government that were so terrified of a Trump presidency because he was going to do what he's doing. He's firing them all and he's cleaning house. The first time President Trump was our president, he had never been in government before, and I think he didn't understand when he took office just how deep and embedded the deep state is. I don't like to say it like this, but it's the truth. I was in federal government for 25 years. I was a service member, a soldier for 25 years, and the people that I served with, because you never talk politics till now. You never talk politics in the U.S. military. I didn't know where people stood, but man, when Donald Trump became president, it all started to change because they're company men. When you get up to the colonel, the general rank, they're company men. That's why I left. And you either toe the line and protect the institution from the people, which is what they do. They're protecting the institution from the people that they're sworn to serve. And so you're never going to find out the answer with that kid because I'm pretty sure that some federal agency was involved in it. I mean, that's my 2 cents. I don't know anything you don't know from watching TV, except for my experience in the federal government. I would be shocked if there wasn't some involvement. So we're never going to know what happened. Sorry, I wish I had a better answer for you.
You've been the first person I've heard that talked about these China having all of these big field and so forth.
Yeah.
But the main thing is, they can be drilling holes down in there and could eliminate that gasoline for our number one. And it's within about a very small distance between that and this.
Yeah.
And so I have a map of that shows exactly where those China is.
Yeah.
And we had it in Wichita State University a year ago. Had a Chinese.
Put it up to your mouth. That's what he's asking. Yeah.
Lady that was working with Wichita State University on how they were drilling down into our different layers.
Yeah.
And I think according to this article that I have, it says every one of these Chinese people, they're actually they're spies.
Yeah, so there's a law, you guys have probably heard about it, but there's a law in China. If you're a Chinese citizen and you're in the United States or any other country, and China asks you for proprietary information, sensitive information, you are required by law to provide that. So we've got, and even if you're a U.S. citizen that came from China and you are an American, but your family still lives back there, they still have leverage over you to force you to do things you might not want to do. And so I think, we've been asleep to this for a really long time, and we're finally starting to stir. But I'll tell you, this foreign lobbying thing is a serious, serious concern. It's not just in Kansas, it's across the country. So in addition to all the stuff I do here in Kansas, I'm also part of an organization called ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. It's an organization of conservative state legislators from all over the country. We're actually meeting at the first week of December in Fort Worth, Texas. I'm the chairman of the Federalism, International Relations, and Homeland Security Task Force. And we bring a lot of the stuff that we're doing here to the national level so it can be mirrored in other states, but we also steal a lot of good ideas from other states that we can bring here. And this foreign adversary lobbying thing, was an idea from a guy in West Virginia. His name's Bill Ridenour. He's a senator, really smart guy. He was a Army or a Navy counterintelligence guy for years and years and years. And you have a beer with that guy, you're going to leave shaken. I mean, it's really terrifying what they're doing. And we have not been able, this conservative organization founded by Newt Gingrich, we have not been able to get this adopted as model policy for ALEC because we're being lobbied by communist Chinese, and they're working behind the scenes with the private sponsors to try to kill it so that it doesn't become model policy. I mean, we are completely infiltrated in this country, and it's they've exposed and exploited our freedom to attack us. And so I go through my campaign donations. I am not bought and paid for by China, so I'm gonna tear this thing apart, or I'm gonna die trying. So.
Actually, China's pretty smart, but Russia and the United States are probably trying to have enough weapons to destroy the world 10 times over, okay? So they stopped a few silos, from popping off there. But what about Triad? The Air Force has got two legs of Triad, obviously the silos, the B-52s and the B-2s, and then obviously the Navy has some submarines out there. The important thing, I think, is to just pass that target on quickly somewhere else if they stop one. And I just think it'd be enough firepower even if they stop a few silos.
Yeah, and even if, you're right. I mean, the nuclear deterrence, what's kept us out of a great power war for the last 75 years. But there are all kinds of other nefarious things you could do. You could isolate and shut down a silo so some people could go in and steal a warhead. There's a lot of really terrifying things that you could do if you have the ability to flip a switch and cut a nuclear facility off from the rest of the world. As an aside, last year, or maybe it was the year before, the Kansas Security Committee, we went to Wolf Creek, to the nuclear facility. And I was really concerned. When I went there, I'm like, this is a huge vulnerability. We got a giant nuclear bomb sitting in the middle of Kansas, and so they humored me. They took me around. They showed me all the physical security. I mean, that place is more secure than any military installation I've ever been on. But I kept saying, well, you don't have to attack it. You just hack the thing. You just hack the thing. And they were patient with me, right? And so they took me into the control room. And the control room of the Wolf Creek nuclear facility looks like the Apollo 11. It's like 1970s technology. Everything is dials, flip switches, and lights. And the only communication with the outside world to that facility is a landline phone that is like buried. And that's good. That's great. You cannot hack something that has no internet and no computer. And so that somebody could hack into the landline and tell them to do X, Y, or Z. But all the nuclear engineers are there in the room, and they can see all the indicators are mechanical and electric and no internet. So I left there, I'm like, thank God. I really did. So that's one thing you don't have to worry about is Wolf Creek Nuclear Facility. But this other stuff, you have to be able to talk to the bombs in the silos in order to have a deterrent. So. Yes, sir.
So I have two questions. One question is vote by mail. I prefer to vote by mail, but my vote was not received until after election day. Is it still counted or not?
Yeah. Thank you very much for asking that question. I'm pretty proud of this. So what he's talking about is since 2017, we had a law in the state of Kansas that said for 3 days after the election, if your ballot shows up, we're still going to count it. And when I first became the chair of the elections committee, I was concerned about that from the voter confidence angle, because what I've been working on is restoring confidence in our elections, because a lot of people have given up on our elections, and I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, because I'll come back and talk about that. But after we got to digging, so even before I was running for Secretary of State, I would go around and I would talk to clerks and election commissioners in all the counties, because we're passing laws that they have to execute. I need to know how it impacts them. And what I heard over and over again from clerks was, these ballots, they show up in that 3-day grace period, And a lot of them we can't count anyways, because the law says they have to be postmarked so that we know that the vote was cast before Election Day. And so I've been screaming, and I got Paul Wagner's my vice chair. We've had a lot of conversations on this, and we've both done a lot of work. I couldn't have done it without Paul. We finally got the Secretary of State to ask the clerks, hey, how many of these ballots are you not able to count because they don't have a postmark? Well, they asked in 2024, and during the primary election, 1 in 3 of the ballots that was showing up during the grace period, which is about 1,000 ballots in the primary, 2% of all the mail-in votes that were cast in the primary, they couldn't count because they didn't have a little postmark. To me, that's unconscionable. The voter did everything we told them they had to do. The clerk did everything we told them that they had to do, but because the post office didn't put a stamp on it, we're not going to count it anyways. We just disenfranchised that voter. And so with that data, we were finally able, after 3 years, to override the governor's veto, and now Election Day is Election Day in the state of Kansas. Thank you for the question.
One more question. It's about women in the military. My understanding is the Defense Secretary does not like women to be in the military.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? You don't think they should fight for the country?
So Secretary of War Hegseth, it's not that he doesn't like women in the military. His concern is that no matter whether you're a man or a woman, no matter what race you are, no matter what religion, you have to be able to do the physical tasks demanded of a soldier. Forever, the whole time I was in the Army, there were 2 scales. There was because men and women are different, right? Biologically, men and women are different. Physics is physics. And we had 2 different scales for the physical fitness test. There was a scale for men, and there was a scale for women, which is fine. It's fine. However, when you then say women can be airborne rangers, women can be artillerymen, women can be combat engineers, women can be all these very physically demanding jobs, but they're being graded to a different standard, what was happening is women were being accepted into branches where they just physically were not capable of doing the job. So what Pete Hegseth did is he changed to a gender-neutral scale. Whether you're a man or a woman, you're on the same physical fitness scale. You can either meet the requirements or not meet the requirements for the job that you're trying to do. And if you can't meet the requirements, whether you're a guy or a gal, you're not going to get that job. And I think that's bullets don't know what gender you are. Bullets don't know what religion, what race you are. They just know that that you're soft and they go through you real fast. So you need people that are physically capable of doing these critical jobs that protect our country.
Thanks for being here, Pat. First on the men and women thing, let me just say, vive la différence. But the question is, you talked about what's happening in Salina and the Army's using that. So you bring in lots of experts and lots of people with great knowledge, and they're looking at it. But then the infiltration issue comes
Yeah.
up. It's not just us getting that information, it's how do we protect what we're doing there from getting exited to places, because we're importing a lot of smart people from other parts of the world.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's-
didn't Xi Jinping?
Yeah, Xi Jinping, yeah. So I shared your concern. And I feel a lot better about it after hearing the briefing. The Kansas National Guard is the lead agency for this. And obviously the Kansas National Guard, they do all the security clearance, all the stuff that other agencies maybe don't do. Obviously there's going to be technology partners that are here. But interestingly, when you're working on sensitive stuff like that, usually the technology partners you're working with have to get the same security clearance that the military has to get. So I'm a lot less concerned now. Salina, Kansas, it's not in a canyon. It's, it looks like the rest of Kansas. And so somebody standing on the perimeter making films of the technology, there's really no way to stop that. That's a feature, not a bug of American society. But as far as the actual kind of intricacies of working with the technology, I feel a lot better about it than I did when we started the committee. But it's a valid concern. It absolutely is. Yes, sir.
Okay, this concerns House Bill 2020.
Yes.
You sponsored it. I was fascinated when I read it. A driver's license of non-citizens requiring the director of the division to make monthly reports of names and addresses. Why was this necessary and why was it?
Yeah. I don't know if y'all saw the news the other day. Attorney General and the Secretary of State had a press conference, and turns out that the mayor of Coldwater's been voting for 29 years, and he ain't a citizen, and he's the mayor. Yeah. So, which is really fascinating because when we were I was carrying the constitutional amendment on citizen-only voting. The Democrats were up there telling us this was a conspiracy theory and it never happened. Well, I present Exhibit A. Non-citizen voting is something I've been working on a lot, especially this year. And it's about addressing people. It's about voter confidence, right? Because if people believe that their vote is being diluted by non-citizen votes, they're less confident that their vote is carrying the full weight that it should. And so I dug into this. The first thing I discovered, and you could have knocked me off the chair when I found out, did you know that nowhere in our state statute and nowhere in our Kansas Constitution does it actually say you have to be a citizen to vote? Because it was so damn obvious, nobody ever wrote it down. And so this year I sponsored and we passed a constitutional amendment. It's going to be on the ballot November 2026. I humbly suggest you vote yes. And it says only U.S. citizens can vote in the state of Kansas. So it'll be in our law. But once you pass it, you have to enforce it. Because a law that you don't enforce is just wishful thinking. And so House Bill 2020 is about enforcing it. When I dug a little bit more, I found out some other disturbing facts. So we're a real ID state. Every state's a real ID state now because Donald Trump put his foot down and said, we're going to know who everybody is. And so we're a real ID state. Did you know that you don't have to be a citizen to get a real ID? You just have to prove that you are who you said you are and that you're in the country legally. Because if you've got a green card and you're working, you have to be able to drive to work, right? Well, being in the country legally could mean you have a green card and have had one for 29 years and been voting on it. Or it could mean that 2 years ago, I downloaded the CBP One app in Nicaragua and then I got on Biden Air and they flew me to Garden City. You're legal. You're legal. Until we can get rid of you, you're on temporary protected status and you're in the country legally. So when I dug a little bit more, I found out that 6 times over the last 15 years, successive Secretaries of State, Chris Kobach and then Scott Schwab, have been able to cajole the DMV into giving them a list of people who are non-citizens who have driver's licenses. And they don't want to do it because it's work. So they have to kind of beg and borrow and plead to get them to do it. Well, the last time that they did that was in November of last year after the election. They got the list. They found 80 non-citizens on the voter roll, and they're pretty sure 20 of them voted. And this guy, they didn't even find in that sweep. This guy they found because the Trump administration, when they came in, they ordered DHS to redo the SAVE system. It's like the systematic alien verification for entitlement system. Basically, it's like when somebody goes to get food stamps, they check to see if they're a citizen or not. They've revamped it so you can upload your entire voter roll and it'll spit out all the non-citizens on your voter roll. And Chris Kobach the other day said they think there's like 1,000. They found 1,000 names came back that they're investigating. So don't tell me this isn't happening. 20 votes is too many. You know, this local election in Leavenworth, there were several people who were elected by less than 20 votes. My senator unseated the Democrat incumbent by 31 votes out of 30,000. So don't tell me 20 votes is not a big deal. But it's probably more than that. So this year we passed 2020, which requires the DMV. The negotiated settlement, we ended up at every 3 months, not every month, but every 3 months, they have to send a list of non-citizens that have driver's licenses to the Secretary of State so they can scrub the voter rolls. And so we can tell Kansans, no, non-citizens aren't voting because they're not on the voter rolls. Thank you.
In California, they took 17,000 commercial driver's licenses.
Yeah. It's that CDL thing's a whole other. I'm sorry.
Thanks, Pat. Hey, I did just want to FYI, I went to the election certification yesterday, and 142 ballots that were advanced ballots did not get placed because they didn't make the postmark.
This. Yeah, it is, and it's this is not a novel solution. 32 states in the union only accept mail-in ballots until the election night deadline because of this problem. We just made it a cool 2/3 by adding our name to that list. This is to me obvious. I mean.
Okay, my question to you, I have 3 of them. If you're elected Secretary of State, what is your plan to improve and correct the voter rolls?
Yeah, so you got a minute? So I don't know how it is here in Sedgwick County, but when I knock doors in Leavenworth and I go to a door, and I've got the voter roll in front of me, and I go to the door, and there's the 2 voters who live there now, the 2 voters who live there before them, and the 2 voters who live there before them. Our voter rolls are a mess. We just had an interim committee in Earl Glenn. I don't know if anybody knows Earl Glenn. He's a commissioner on the Public Disclosure Commission. He's a data nut. And he put up a slide where he had taken the census numbers and he had divided them by age group, and then he had overlaid the voter registration rolls. We have more people 65 years or older registered to vote in the state of Kansas than we have humans that are 65 or older. We clearly have a problem, right? So a couple things that we've done already, to get to your question. A couple things we did already. My second year in the legislature, I sponsored and passed a bill that gives the clerks, because the clerks are the ones that have to take them off, it gives them the authority, if somebody hasn't had any voting activity for 4 years, they can send a card. And if the card comes back undeliverable or it doesn't come back at all, it starts a clock to take that person off the voter rolls. To clean up the deceased voters on our voter rolls is a little more complicated because there's a federal law, it's called the National Voter Registration Act, and it ties our hands in a lot of ways. But it used to be there were 3 ways to identify that a voter was deceased. You could use the obituaries in the newspaper, but nobody puts obituaries in the newspaper anymore because nobody gets the newspaper anymore. You could use the Social Security rolls to identify people who had died, but I don't know if you were following the whole Doge thing. We got 120-year-old people getting checks, so that's probably not a good source. And then the third way was if the Kansas Department of Health and Environment issued a death certificate. Well, if somebody goes to a nursing home in Oklahoma and they die there, Department of Health and Environment isn't going to issue a death certificate for somebody who died in another state. So this year we passed a bill that adds a 4th way, online obituaries. So mortuaries, when you die, they do an online obituary. Now clerks can use that to identify people who've deceased. But there's a lot more I want to do. And this kind of gets to your question. So if you should lose your mind and move to Oklahoma, I don't know why you would do that, but if you did, and you went over there and you got a driver's license, the DMV in Oklahoma sends a notice to the Kansas DMV that says, cancel that person's driver's license because they now have a driver's license in Oklahoma and you can only have a driver's license in one state. Why can't the Kansas DMV then tell the Secretary of State's office this person has moved so we can take them off the voter rolls? The reason why is because it's not in statute, and they're not going to do it if we don't make them in statute. So we're going to try to get that done. Something else to get voters who have passed away off our voter rolls that I'd like to do. Do you know who knows 100% of the time if you're alive or dead? Your family, your bank, and your credit card company. Your family knows because they were there, and your bank knows because they don't want to give you more money. And so what I'd like to do is 2 things. First, a family member affidavit. Because I hear this all the time. You know, I went to vote and I looked at the poll book and my husband who passed away 3 years ago is still in the poll book. a loved one, an immediate family member should be able to sign an affidavit that says this person is dead, and then we take them off the voter rolls. The other thing I'd like to do is for the banks, our voter rolls are public information. You could go to the clerk right now and you pay $25 and they'll give you the voter roll. What I'd like to do is I'd like to take our voter roll and I'd like to share it with the credit rating agencies. Not so they can harvest data, we'd have to have contracts plate, not so they check your credit before you vote. I just want to give it to them and say, hey, who on this list is dead? So we can get them off the voter rolls. There's a lot we could do. I could talk to you for 3 days about this. In addition to being part of ALEC, I'm also on the board of advisors for the U.S. Elections Assistance Commission, which is tasked by the president with a lot of the executive order stuff. And there's a lot of other stuff that other states are doing that we could be doing in Kansas that I want to implement here as Secretary of State.
Okay, I only have one last. I said
Okay.
3, but only one. Okay, can the election machines be programmed using a thumb drive? And if so, why is this allowed and why can't we eliminate this capability?
Yeah, so there are as many election machines in use in the state as there are counties. So some of them, some of the counties, they program them themselves. Some of them, they have like the person who owns the voting machine, they give them the information and they produce the ballot, the electronic form of the ballot, and then they put it into the machine. But the vote machines are not connected to the internet. Yeah, the voting machines are not connected to the internet, so there's no way, whether you program that ballot on your laptop or your desktop or you got it from the agency that runs the machines, there's no other way to get the ballot onto the machine than to carry it with some kind of digital storage device. Now, the concern is that digital storage device could also be rewriting the software. So there is a system that's already, because the Election Assistance Commission requires this, but we're not requiring it. There is a system, it's called a hash validation, where the computer does like basically a sum of all of the software in that machine, and it spits out the number of that checksum. And you can check after you've done the programming, before you put that machine into use, to make sure that number shows that nobody's monkeyed with the software inside. We're not doing that in Kansas right now. It's not a required check, and I'd like it to be a required check. It's just because you have to know that the ballot's programmed correctly, but you also need to know that the machine's programming for vote counting has not been tampered with.
Okay, a lot
Okay.
of information.
Thank you. Thank you.